Living and Loving Life's podcast is to help people find their balance spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally, financially, and socially. Listeners will have a positive mindset, renewed outlook for themselves, their future, and believe they are beautifully made inside and out. Listeners will shine and be an example to others as they live fully, completely with no barriers, no burdens, and no regrets.
Welcome back, everybody, to Motivational Mondays with Living and Loving Life podcast. We have an amazing guest today. We have Jennifer with us. She's going to tell us a little bit about herself and where she is in her journey. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, how are you all? I'm glad to be here. Yes, I'm Jennifer Peavy. I have a varied background. I originally was an engineer and then moved into innovation management and then into industrial design. I found that what I was looking for was some way to bring myself to the table. And so that was one reason I have a curiosity for many things that are out there. So I like to try new things. My latest journey has been actually writing a book. It wasn't something I ever intended to do, but this is what happened and the opportunity was there and I took it. So right now I am looking myself as a thought leader. I'm putting some writing out there, not only with the book, but social media, and I'm seeing what sticks on whether it's coaching or if it's a workshop. And beyond that, I freelance in general. So
awesome. So what are you seeing is sticking the best so far?
It's been very interesting to see the number of people that do respond. My particular topic was on how to stave off burnout. And I think because of the pandemic, there's a lot of that out there and people rethinking their lives and really exploring.
Yeah.
And so I think people just want to talk. I'm not really sure about where it goes from there, but people do want to talk. And I think that's a good thing for me to just follow.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so tell us about this book, Natural Reflectors. What is that? What is that?
Yes. So it began actually as a workbook. I went into the pandemic. I had voluntarily left my position. I had a contract. The contract ended, and I decided to stay home for a couple of months, and I was going to raise a puppy. And then we got into the pandemic. And it was a little difficult to try to find a new position during that time. So I was reassessing what I wanted to do. I had this blank sheet of paper in front of me. I could do anything with it. Lots of options. I could go back to employment. I could be underemployed. I could start a business. I could go teaching. But I was looking for some structure to be able to find a way to find those things. What was it that meant the most to me? And so I made this workbook. And after about 3 or 4 months, I was finding that I found I had a lot more control. I felt I had a lot more peace and joy in my life. It wasn't all the time, right, but I was amazed at how much it did happen. So what I did was I started sharing that with other people. And I came across a friend of mine who had just published a book. And she suggested that maybe I need to look at the community that she was with, which was New Degree Press or the Creator Institute that's out of Georgetown. And so I talked with them and told them about my workbook. And they said it might be better actually to do a book first.
Wow.
And the idea of the structure was I was taking time to reflect on what I wanted to do and decide what the actions were that I were going to take based upon what was most important to me. The twist that I had, though, was to look to nature on how nature combined its times of rest and its times of action. And that way I would be able to use that as a metaphor on how I developed my own personal process.
Nice. But so let's stop there really quick. I want to say something about that because in your mind, you had the workbook in place, right? You were like, that's what I'm going to do. But because you were open-minded and allowed someone's not opinion, but just their perspective, you know, and that's a good thing for people because I think that they come into situations closed-minded and can't really get what they, because then what if the workbook didn't work out as well as your book is doing?
Right.
You know, it's like opportunities missed when you don't come into things with open mind.
Right. And then another way that I could follow that thread was I went into this with my story.
Right.
This is what I did. This is what I was inspired by.
Right.
And this particular process with the Creator Institute was an iterative process. You wrote some stories and you kind of, it took you about 6 weeks before you actually made an outline. It wasn't like you went in there with, this is what I'm going to write.
Right.
And so they had some opinions about what they saw. And they said, it's interesting what you've done, but it would probably impact more people if you talked about how they could develop their own process as opposed to following mine, because each of us is different and each of us changes with time. And so it was a right turn, which meant a lot of the stories I had written, some of them were helpful and some were not, but it was a good way to go. And I feel much better about the book. And I think more people would appreciate it because it's more about principles and encouragement on how to do things as opposed to follow me type of thing.
Right. Yeah. Because like you said, everybody's journey is different, but the way they process the information or the way they handle it is a little different. No one's way is the right way. There's just, these are the ways it goes. Right. Okay. So awesome. So so the book came from you kind of needing guidance in your own life, or not guidance, but basically what road you were going to take moving forward.
Right.
Awesome.
Right.
Awesome. It's really fun to see this. And the reason for you being on the show is, one, you're awesome, but two, also is like, this is right on point. It's like, people just need to, it's never too late. You
Absolutely.
could be in a whole career. You could have went to school for 12 years to do one thing, get there and say, you know what, the seat doesn't feel right for me. And it's okay to step back and be like, okay, let's try something else,
Oh, yeah. I am the poster child for that. So
that's why I was like, I have to have her, because there's so many people that are successful, and I don't want to take anything from it, did an amazing job in their careers, but they just don't feel fulfilled completely.
Right. And things do change as well. You might have been fulfilled at one point.
Right.
So I started off with engineering, and a lot of that was because I was good at STEM. My father was an engineer, and it made sense. And it was at that time in the 80s, the late 80s, early 90s, it was a very stable job to have.
Right.
And then things changed. Corporate started laying off, and it was a little less secure and that type of thing. And so then I started also feeling that I had more to give, that there was more to me than just that technical side. So that's why I ended up switching over to this innovation management. But then I had this opportunity to get more into the empathy side. So in my 40s, I went back to school and got a degree in industrial design, which really was a big right turn. I mean, I was in the room with people young enough to be my children.
So what?
Yes, exactly. And they accepted me and I accepted them, and we had a great time with it. And then now in my 50s, now, granted, the author is probably not my only thing. My goal now is to have a portfolio of income sources. But I can tell you pretty much everything I'm doing, all of those have nothing to do with any of my degrees. I'm doing project management. I'm just facilitating people. I've started an Airbnb. I now have the book.
Nice.
All of these things are very different. And I can say, because of not the book, but the journey that I went through, it made me more confident to try things that were completely different.
Yeah.
Like supporting myself as opposed to being employed by another.
Yeah. So I want to talk about that because I'm rereading Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And you mentioned the engineering has a secured job. But what is security in jobs?
Back then,
right.
And back when you look at my father and the reason that she became an engineer, it was just like farming or banking. It was something that you would do for your entire career.
Right.
It literally was something you would spend 40 years. And you might move within the company and that was it. And, at the end of it, you got the great big watch or the clock or whatever it was. But that was common.
Yeah.
Part of it may be because you were in a town that had a mill. It was kind of the way that my parents grew up.
Yeah.
And then therefore, even though it was in a larger city, that was what you expected.
Right.
Even when I was in college, I was told that we would be switching every 5 years, which when my first job, I was there probably 19.
When you say you would switch every 5 years, what does that mean?
Either switch careers or switch companies is what we were advised in the 90s, that was the trend, which is interesting because, you see it like right now, 2 years is a really good way to keep a millennial. I mean, if you've got them for 3 years, that's just huge.
But if you think about it, like they say in the book, these jobs are for you to find trades and things to build for yourself. This is not a forever.
For yourself.
For yourself. It's that personal brand that needs to be built. So I think my longest job probably was about 6 years. Yeah.
And I think that's the switch is security was you were working for someone else
for these long periods of time.
It was their brand and the reward was you were part of this family and part of this community. And of course that has fallen away. Yeah. That's not a family. It's not a community. And so therefore you do need to take care of yourself. So I think
that fell away because it is really a cutthroat world. If you no longer serve them that easy, they're not thinking about, can you feed your family? Do you have somewhere to go? That's not their thought process. It's about keeping their doors open. So why would that not be our thought process to keep us safe in a place always making needs? So even if that person said goodbye, we have 4 other assets coming in to say, I can do this until I find something else that suits me for bettering myself for later.
Exactly.
Okay. So how can we reflect so that we don't get those burnouts?
So if I back up so the definition of burnout then is that you will be exhausted. You put a lot of distance between yourself and the work, and it's hard to be able to focus. It's hard to get your mind wrapped around it. And those are the definitions of burnout. I like to add another one is that you don't necessarily trust there will be a positive outcome. And so you feel like if you're going to try, you want to try for things that are going to go somewhere. And burnout often in that state, you don't feel like anything I do is not going to work. So what I feel like reflection does is allow you to see a much larger picture and a more long-term view of what is going on. Okay. I liken it to the idea of driving down a road. Now, I live in North Carolina, and I'm not that far from the Appalachian Mountains, and there's a lot of twists and turns on those roads. And often, sometimes there are guardrails and sometimes they're not. And sometimes there's the mountain that's right there. But I liken reflection to keep you out of burnout is the idea of driving down that road and checking in. You check in with the rear view mirror, you check in with what's going on in the oncoming traffic, you check in with your alertness, because if you're about to go through a very intense area, you might want to stop and get some coffee.
Right.
So you check in.
Yeah.
And all of that type of stuff. And they're just little nudges to be able to do that. And I think that's how reflection helps us prevent burnout. Now, there are other ways that we could look at that analogy. Let's say we did stop to get the coffee, but we also got a cheeseburger and we just got off the phone with an argument with somebody at work and we're very distracted and we don't see this sign that says we're about to get into some tight turns or there's a really big incline. If we don't know it's coming, we can't prepare for it. And then all of a sudden we're in the middle of it and we don't know what happened. Right. Now, heaven forbid that we actually go off the road or heaven forbid we go off the cliff, right. And that's where the burnout actually happens. I think reflection also gives us a chance to get ourselves back on the road, right. That we can stop and figure out where we are. Did we go over the cliff? Do we need to call a tow truck? Right. Do we just go off and we're on the shoulder and we need to breathe and rest?
How far are we gone?
How far are we gone? Where are we? Yeah. And then what is it that is important enough to us to be able to get back on the road? Mm. And it may be something like, I do need some coffee. So let me rest a little bit here, or let me sit here and let's drink the coffee and give it time for the caffeine to get kicking. Yeah, but that gives us a chance to get out of the burnout.
That's a great way to illustrate it to someone that's in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
Because when you're in there, it's hard to say, be aware or look ahead of you when you can't. You're in the middle of that crazy road. You're on the cliff hanging on the side,
Exactly.
To put it that way, it helps someone back themselves up and really take evaluation of everything.
Because it might be, what if you're teetering? You haven't gone over the cliff. Exactly. It might be just take a second to try to figure out, what do I need to do? Because if you act too quickly without all the information, you may just go over,
Exactly. Awesome. Okay. So what is a key message or a lesson that the readers will take from your book if they do decide to pick it up?
So there are three main lessons that I have, and one of them is shifting that mindset. We have a particular reality. I had a reality of security in corporate. The reality now is I need to take care of myself. Whatever somebody's reality is, there's this opportunity to shift it to something new, and we're constantly changing.
Absolutely.
And the world is constantly changing, but just being open to the fact that things are changing. It takes a lot of courage also to accept that change. Yeah. And to resist whatever the status quo is. If the status quo is to, change your job a lot, maybe the resistance is to stay. Right. It all depends upon what's best for someone. The second thing is this idea of knowing what the long game is. And I think that's the thing that reflection gives you, is being able to say, what are the long-term effects of what I'm doing, or the long-term goals that I want to have, or outcomes that I want to have. And I like to think of what I'm doing today as a brick that I'm laying into a wall. And yes, it is short-term, and all I need to deal with is that brick. And it's also a small bite that makes it feel doable.
Right.
But then there are times with reflection that I step back and I take a look at that entire wall. And I try to understand, how do I want that wall built? Do I want a door in it so that people can come through? Or am I blocking some sort of toxic something? What is it about that wall that I need?
Yeah.
And so being able to spend some time and thinking about what that long game is very helpful. And I think that's one of the big lessons. The other thing about it is, just like the brick in the wall, you see how systems go together. Okay. I can see how my sleep patterns, or how the weather, or how certain things affect my energy levels. Mm-hmm. And if my energy levels are high, then I'm doing really well. Or if they're low, they're not so well. So that's a way for us to be able to think about how things go together, and then hopefully direct how they go together. Because really that gives you the chance to design your own life. And that's the third big lesson, is the fact that each of us are unique, and that our lives are going to be unique to us. And in fact, the best way to have it is for us to have an authentic extension of ourselves that is out there. Things like having space for self-care, being able to find what our purpose and meaning is, and understand what we're willing to do to reach that. Because many times you may be involved with something that you need to get out of before you can start the new thing. Like you say, you may have a job that's just helping you get through.
Yeah.
But you need to understand, what is it going to take? What sacrifices are you willing to go through to let go of that to begin this new thing?
Yeah. I think that's probably my client's hardest thing is, scaling back, or having to do certain, people want to stay comfortable, but want change. And change comes when you're uncomfortable. That's just the fact.
And one of the blessings for me was actually the pandemic, because
me too, for sure.
I couldn't have, here I am.
Yeah, exactly. But I also feel like it gave me time to reflect.
Yes.
On what I didn't want. I wasn't constantly moving like a crazy person. So I had time to actually sit in it and really evaluate everything for what it was.
Exactly.
All right, Jennifer. So during your journey, tell me one of the hardest lessons that you've learned, and do you apply it to your day-to-day life?
So the reason I got into this was this idea of pressure, and this busyness, and this constant action. Probably the hardest lesson has been that is not something that anybody imposed on me. It is in the culture. It is part of the status quo. But I fought more about my internal voice that said, you're not getting enough done. This isn't getting done, as opposed to anybody out there saying it.
Yeah.
And it is out there. But it was more that entire thing of what I was being told. One of the things that I then had to say was, well, does anybody really care? I mean, I was here alone.
Right.
Did anybody really care about how I was taking care of myself? As long as I was paying my bills.
Yeah. Right.
I didn't really care. Well, as long as it wasn't illegal. But, ultimately, nobody was being inconvenienced by the choices I made, or whether I don't want to say fail, but whether it didn't turn out as good as I had hoped.
Right.
So learning how to talk to that voice and say, we're going to try something, almost negotiating with that voice. There were some time periods where I would try to shut it up, but really that voice is helpful.
Right.
So it was more about how to work with that voice.
Exactly.
And say, okay,
mindset.
It's part of that changing the mindset. So even just recently, so this is November. This is a time period where I am looking at the year and I'm going to start cleaning up. I'm starting to document and close out what I was trying to accomplish in 2021. And there have been times this year that I have felt that I have not gotten a whole lot done, or I've gotten more done, or I've been crazy, or whatever it is. But when I looked back, particularly at all the intentions that I set last February, I have met them all.
Nice.
And some of them I have exceeded. And so this voice that right now that is saying, hey, come on, we got to go. I'm like, wait a minute. I set my intentions. It's okay for us to do a little bit more, but there's no reason to push.
Yeah.
We've already
exceeded.
We should be celebrating that.
And allowing yourself to have that rest time to get ready for the next.
To clean up for the next. And that will be more my December is when it's truly rest. It's just this coming down during this time period, the things that collecting all the information and filing them away type of thing.
Yeah. No, it makes total sense. Okay. So one last question. In your opinion, Jennifer, what does it mean to live and love life?
So I think the core of that is the idea of caring about yourself enough to ask those questions about what living means, what makes me happy, what brings joy and peace. Awesome. I start every day with a practice, and part of it is checking my energy level. What am I grateful for? And what am I uncomfortable with that I need a statement of faith? But the last thing is, what do I desire?
Nice.
And desire, I don't remember where it comes from, but it is about reaching for the stars. And I'm looking for what nourishes me for today.
Nice.
And so my thing on how would I live and love life today is the fact that we just had that time change, and it is going to be dark after dinner. And that's normally my time to get, my type of stuff done, which right now is a lot of outside stuff. And I get up in the dark and I go to bed in the dark, and I'm spending a whole lot of time at my desk. And I said, I need to get outside while the light is out there.
Nice.
And be a part of it. And I felt like that was living to me right now. It can be very simple.
Absolutely.
But it's what I need today. There'll be another day that'll be more complicated, but that's today.
That's the thing is when you get to that place of peace, the simple things are what makes you happy. People think it's this grand party or this grand thing, and it's not. It's the little, just the things that are coming across or completed or done, just little steps. And you're like, woo, I feel good today, That's the thing is I think people think it's a destination, and it's not a destination. It's a continuous of little things of just having that peace, being able to just breathe.
I do think that mindset is a destination.
Right.
You still have to work it, and you still have to be disciplined about it. But going from that harried, frantic to the focus on that, I think is a destination. That is just that lowering that stress enough that you can hear your gut.
Exactly.
That you can hear how you feel about the options you have and the choices that are before you.
Yeah. All right. Well, Jennifer, I wanted to thank you, but I do want you to let the listeners know where to find you or your book, because it sounds like a really cool one that people should definitely put their hands on. So if you can let us know where to find you.
Sure. There's my website, which is jenniferpeavy.com. And then my social media handle is @jennifer.thebblacklab.
Nice. And I will have all of that in our show notes for all the listeners that want to get in contact with you. I want to thank you, and I want to thank my listeners for tuning back in. Thank you so much for your wisdom. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I was so glad to be here. It's been a lot of fun.
All right. Bye, guys. I will see you back next week for your Motivational Mondays. I hope you have an amazing week. Bye.
If you love the Living and Loving Life podcast, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode. Thank you for listening.